53. And a training camp talk is brought to you by Paul Henry's Window Installation. PaulHenry'sWindows.com, your clear home improvement choice. So the national media, I would say, this is pretty fair to say, right, Tobes and Darius, and you pointed this out, Tobes, not thinking too highly of Washington. I think some of that's inevitable, right? Whenever somebody finishes at the bottom, even though you go worst to first all the time, just ask, half of the divisions in the sport, but still there's a stink on you. Right, when you pick in the top 10, when you have a blowout season, especially one that is so much worse than expectations. Like if Cleveland goes 5-12 this year, no one's going to be disappointed. A couple of Cleveland fans will, but it's like, that's how we have you.
Yep.
That's how we feel about you. When everyone thinks you've turned a corner and you're one of the cool kids, how dare you disappoint us? That kind of happens. So some of that stink, I think, is inevitable. Whether it's fair or not, I think that's kind of the conversation. But the national media, not too kind to Washington. So Tobes is on the lookout for this. Compiled a list, and you can add any color you want before we turn it over to Darius. But anything I'm missing there, you kind of notice this and say, hey, look at all these trends.
Yeah, I mean, the concept is, I was thinking about, you've got local fans, some members of the media that are pretty high on this team, and understandably so. I think watching training camp, it feels like there have been some positive vibes around the team, some of the good that you've seen out there, and then you go on and read the latest NFL power ranking or the latest line ranking or whatever it is, and it's like, hey, by the way, your team sucks. And so it's like, which one is correct? Mm-hmm. Maybe it's probably somewhere in the middle, but which one's more correct? So I thought it was an interesting discussion to go back and look what national people are saying and see if, hey, is this fair, or is this something that maybe they're just not plugged in every day like those that are out that practice every single day?
Because that certainly has happened before. Darius, I turn it over to you. Walk us through this.
So we'll start with Nick Shook of NFL.com. He has been on the show a couple times over the past year, and one of the things that we brought him on the show for most recently was that he ranked the Commanders 29th in his preseason power rankings. He goes on to say in his rankings of the Commanders being 29th that this is the year in which Dan Quinn must prove he has strong coaching chops or else. And it's also the season in which Daniels must prove he's more durable than he was in 2025. What say you about NFL.com's Nick Shook's take, having the Commanders 29th in the power rankings?
So he's right about Quinn, in my view. I think it's an underrated story here is there are two new coordinators. The handpicked guys were handpicked and then picked again to be removed. We got two new handpicked guys here. You don't get to do that a million times over. You better be right, especially when one of those units turned in pretty good results in terms of the offense, especially the last couple seasons. But the 29th part, I think that's too harsh. I think that's too low. Now, that doesn't mean they're 10th, but I think 29th is too low because think about who's down at the bottom. Arizona, Tennessee. Think about the Giants, who I think will be better this year. But the Jets, Miami's going to pick first probably. I just named 5 teams. There aren't 5 teams between 32 and 29. I think that's too low.
Yeah, I think it's being a little bit ridiculous to have them that low in the power rankings. But, some of the things in there, Dan Quinn must prove he has strong coaching chops. I think that's right. I think that's completely correct, that this is kind of a make or break season for Dan Quinn. The other point that he makes is that Daniels has to prove that he's more durable. And I think this is a fair point to make, obviously, of what happened last season. But for those that want to be on the Daniel side of things, can look and say, well, is one season of injury-prone, multiple different types of injuries, does that make you an injury-prone player, or is that the one-off type of season? I think that's something that's going to be interesting to watch with Jaden this year, because you guys have pointed out multiple times in 2024 he got banged up with the rib injury. He still played through it. And I think that's something that's going to happen to any football player over time. B-Mitch refers to football as a 100% injury sport. If you play for any amount of time, you're going to sustain an injury. Luckily for Jaden last season, he didn't sustain the devastating injury. I know the elbow injury looked disgusting, but if you're going to choose one appendage on a quarterback to have that kind of an injury, it would be the left elbow, right? Not the right arm, neither one of the knees, right? So he's doing okay in that sense. You're hoping that was the fluky one, but I do think for a lot of people nationally, they look at last season and go, well, Jaden was hurt most of the season, just like we kind of expected when he came out of college. Now he's got to prove once again to a lot of the national media that he can stay healthy. I think that's fair, but maybe a little bit too overstated at times.
Pro Football Focus did a O-line ranking written by Gordon McGinnis, and they ranked the Commanders' offensive line 32nd. Now, they said here in his excerpt, before the injury to the left tackle, Laramie Tunsil, this group was set to rank just inside the top 20. Without Tunsil, this unit could really struggle if he ends up missing the full season. What say you about the 32nd ranking for the offensive line?
I think it's completely fair. Now, will they be 32nd? I tend to be a little bit higher on Brandon Coleman than the average person. I think Cosme's had a really strong camp, and I still believe in Connerly. So that's 60% of your offensive line. But at the same point, I don't feel great about Chris Paul, and I'm maybe lower on the center position overall, whether Nick Allegretti plays there or not, than the average person. So I think it's fair, because if you're not watching this team every day, you're not as dialed in, and you're focusing on what's going on with the Raiders and number 1 overall pick Fernando Mendoza last night, you're not diving into what the heck is going on with Brandon Coleman and Chris Paul, then yeah, chances are you look at this O-line and go, not good, not good, not good. Probably okay in Cosme, and then not good, right? Like, so that's kind of the reality when you look at it from a 10,000-foot view.
So I said this when this came up the other day. I can't give you a deep dive into the Titans' offensive line or the Cardinals or whomever, okay? There are smarter people than me that at some point we have to defer to the smart folks. I don't know that they're 32nd. I don't know that they're 27th. I don't know what kind of case you can make. To me, the point here is they're in that bucket. And I do think that's fair. And I know nobody wants to hear that. But I think once you lose Tunsil, the cascade effect is you went from plus at left tackle. I think Coleman was going to be plus at left guard. It took longer than I thought. I thought it would have happened last year. It didn't, but I thought that was coming, where he would be a really good guard. Center, I'm going to get to in a second. Cosme, I think very strong. I think arrow trending up for Connerly. Now, once you take Tunsil out of there, everything is a little bit worse, and there's more exposure. Coleman, I think, fine, solid, no problem at left tackle, not elite, not his fault, right? You don't complain about someone because they're not great. You try to do better, and they did, and it didn't work out. Bad luck with Tunsil. Now we're back to Chris Paul again, okay? To me, the center spot is the one I'm going, I think the plan stinks. I thought the plan stunk all throughout. It's unproven, and that's what they were going to go with as it was. And now Allegretti can't go 5 minutes without going to the blue tent. Cosme, very solid, and the reports on Connerly haven't been great. I'm still the believer. I still think there's upside there. But until you see it, until that's... Remember how funny it was that people doubted Josh Connerly? Ha, ha, ha. Until that happens, it hadn't happened yet. Again, I'm a believer, but I get it. That group, as I just went through, not that impressive. It's not what should be happening in year 3 of a build. It's not what should be happening with a quarterback on his rookie deal when you've got a lot of salary cap space left to go. I understand the logistics that they thought maybe they were going to get Tyler Linderbaum, who went for $2 trillion, and that's too much for a center. I get that he's the highest paid center by 15, 16 million bucks. Nobody's saying that you have to win that bidding. What I am saying is it just needs to be better than this. The end net can't be you're here in that bottom third of the league.
I can't blame you for missing out on Linderbaum, but I can blame you for cutting Tyler Biadasz for no apparent reason.
Never forget blaming that, yeah.
Like, it's one thing if you looked at it and you said they saved $8 million in cap space. They didn't. They saved next to nothing. And so I never fully understood that, where if it was a true competition, you didn't like Tyler Biadasz, well, fine. You can do the Tyler Biadasz and you can do the Nick Allegretti competition, but to go into the competition with Nick Allegretti, who I still don't feel great about, but if he's the starter, I can at least somewhat understand what they're trying to do. It cannot be Julian Good-Jones. Cannot be Matt Golban. Cannot be. So if that's going to be the case, I just didn't like the plan already, and I also just don't think that you can go in just assuming. I get that we're still, multiple weeks away from the season opener. It's not like it's tomorrow, but at the same point, Nick Allegretti has not gone 2 complete full practices back-to-back in all of training camp. I'm just to expect that he's going to be ready to go for week 1.
Yeah, and he didn't play much center as it is.
And by the way, for a lineman to play all 17 games, that's a lofty expectation. So the idea that Julian Good-Jones wouldn't start at center for 1 or 2 games this season, I don't ever want to see him start at center, much less have to start a couple of games there. No, not a good option.
That's Toby. I'm Danny. This is Grant and Danny here on The Fan. We've got a couple other things we want to do today, things that you're really optimistic about. We'll get to that in the next hour, but we're kind of calling balls and strikes here. We'll do this next as well on the national narrative about Washington and if they've got a point or if they're missing the mark. G&D on The Fan.